Hello everybody. This is now part 38 of international taxation. And let's just bring some remarks on the DTT articles and the background for employed persons, managers, and the income of retired persons from the former employment. So let's begin with the most important thing, that's the income from employment. Here, the basic rule is in Article 15.1 and it has two consecutive steps. The first step just says, general rule is the income from employment can only be taxed in the country where you live, in your country of residence. However, there is an important deviation. It can, step two, be taxed in the country where you work, then the other state can tax. But if you work in another state, then the other state can only tax that money which you get paid for the time where you work in the other state. When you get paid, that does not play a role. So if somebody sends you for, let's say, 7 months to work in the Netherlands, and you work there, then the Netherlands can tax you for the 7 months with everything which you get for these 7 months. So if later, let's say after 3 months, you still get a premium for your willingness to go to the Netherlands, this would be an additional payment for the time in the Netherlands, and it would be taxable in the Netherlands. Well, this rule 15.1, you pay taxes only at home or in the country where you work, leads in the final consequence to a kind of principle that you pay your taxes there where you work at a given time. So to illustrate that, let's have a look to an example. A from Aachen in Germany lives in Germany and has a job in Germany. His job is it, however, to finish some packages for customers from France and to bring them to the post office. This is the only thing which he does the whole day, the whole week, the whole year. So A earns basically all his money for supplying the French market. Now the question is, can France levy a tax? And the OECD model is clear on that. The basic principle, A lives in Aachen, so only Germany can tax him. France, however, can not tax, because although A's job has to do entirely with French customers and with the French market, he does not work in France, but in the German firm, and so France is out. Yeah. Another example, what the rules say. B is resident in the Netherlands, but takes up a job at a firm in Germany. Now, under the OECD model, B can only be taxed with his job income in the Netherlands. However, for times where he exercises his employment activities in Germany, so on German territory, he can be taxed in Germany. Now he does exactly that. He spends all his working time in Germany, in the German firm. So Germany can tax everything which he earns for the time in Germany, so all his income. 1.3, another example. C is now resident in the Netherlands and has a job in Germany. 1 day out of 5 days, however, every week he can work and does work remote, that is, in his own premises at home. Now, what does the DTT say on that? 15.1 says only the Dutch can tax his job income. However, the Germans get a right to tax everything which he gets for the time where he works in Germany. Now his job is with the German firm, but in this particular situation, only 4 days a week he works in Germany, and 1 day a week he works at home in the Netherlands. So 20% of his income are earned not in Germany. So Germany can only tax 4 on 5 of his total work income, 80%. You must note, naturally, that where you have this situation, it will become vital to convince both fiscal administrations of the correct percentage of the time which you have there and there. So to give proof where and when you worked becomes decisive in that situation. The rules are clear. To find the facts is here the problem in reality. However, the basic rule of 51 can also cause other problems when you look to it thoroughly, and that are problems under the aspect of practicability. So let's have a look to things like that. Aachen has his job in Aachen, and now on the 1st of June in year 01, his boss orders him to visit a customer in the Netherlands, just beyond the border, and to repair this customer's washing machine there. D crosses the Dutch border at 9:37 in the morning, arrives at the customer's home at 9:53, works there until 10:27, and crosses the border again at 10:52. During the whole year, this is the only occasion of this kind. Now, what would be the tax treatment under the basic rules of 15.1? Well, only Germany can tax the job income because he lives in Germany. That's step 1 in 15.1. However, the Dutch have a right to tax the work income for all the time where he worked on Dutch territory. In our case, he did this for 1.5 hours. So the wage for the 1.5 hour could be taxable in the Netherlands under the basic rule. Let's evaluate that outcome a bit. So that would mean that D would have to hand in a tax declaration in the Netherlands for his wage for 1.5 hours. So D as an employee would have to make a tax declaration in a foreign country, Netherlands, in a foreign language, Dutch, under foreign rules, the Dutch ones, for an amount which is absolutely ridiculous, probably 20, 30, or at least, at highest, 40 euro. That seems intolerable. By the way, even the Dutch tax official would probably not be happy if he received that tax declaration because, surprise, it makes no big fun to work on the tax declaration of a foreigner, which probably raises some questions and problems where the total amount of the tax base is, let's say, 20 or 40 euro, so that the tax is probably 5 euro, and the stamp for the mail is probably more expensive than the whole tax which comes in. So it seems to be nicer and easier if D would be allowed to forget about this and pay his taxes for that time in his home country, Germany. Well, that seems to be convincing. However, this is not the only thing which might happen. Imagine another example. E lives in the Netherlands and takes up a job in Germany on the 1st of June of year 1. Now he has a probation period of 6 months, and E is so, let's say, we can't mask it. He's so bad in his job, and he is so talented to provoke others that he just gets fired after 3 days. Under the rules of 15.1, the treatment would be that only the Dutch can tax employment income because he lives in the Netherlands. However, deviation for the time in Germany, Germany can tax him. That would give Germany a right to tax his 3 working days in Germany. And now the question is, what do we think about that? Well, if a Dutch takes up a job in Germany, the Dutch knows, I take up a job in Germany, there will be German employment contract law, there will be German laws in other areas, there will be German tax law in all probability. So to make a deviation here from the general principles would not be convincing. Imagine if for such a short-time occupation or short-time employment, you would say the taxes are not going to Germany, then the employer during the whole probation period would never know if the employee survives its probation period, where does the money go to us, or if he's fired earlier, then perhaps to the Dutch. Too complicated. So we might evaluate this situation, okay, where somebody gets a job, takes up a job in another country, then it's clear and justified and the most simple thing to give the right to tax that job income to the country where you work, so where the job is. So here we don't need to do anything with the basic rules. But let's look again to another example. F is in Frankfurt, works for a German employer also in Frankfurt. However, the employer once sends him on a business travel, which is done by aircraft. So from Frankfurt aircraft, he begins to fly across the world, and the aircraft crosses the French territory by 50 minutes, the territory of Spain 30 minutes, and that of Portugal for 20 minutes, and then somewhere else, I don't know. By the way, the minutes are just invented. I have no idea how long you fly across the French territory if you are on the way to somewhere else. But let's do as if that were the case. What would be the treatment under the basic rules? First basic rule, only Germany gets the wages because he is resident in Germany. But if he spends his working time in the territory of another state, then this state gets the right to tax the wage for that working time. So as a consequence of that nice business travel, Spain, France, and Portugal would have the right to claim taxes on a small amount of his wages on that day. That would evidently be complete horror. F would have to hand in a tax declaration to a foreign state in a foreign language under foreign rules, now even 3 times, although the amounts in question are extremely low. So that seems intolerable. However, if he does not hand it in, it would be tax fraud. So what we need is a special rule which solves this kind of intolerable situation. So conclusion is the basic rules at 15.1 should be modified for cases where it's absolutely intolerable, where you think people can't be expected to follow these rules. It would be nonsense, it would be horrible, nobody would be able to do it, especially when especially when the money which would come in is of no importance, really. So one should modify Article 15.1 for all cases of trivial importance in order to simplify the lives of the taxpayer and the tax official. Now, what is of trivial importance or non-importance cannot be determined by fixing a fixed amount of money. 2 reasons. First, if you fix an amount of money now, due to inflation, that amount of money will have in 10 years a completely different significance economically than today. Second, if you have 2 countries, you have 2 exchange rates. You have an exchange rate and 2 currency, usually. So after a while, not only inflation will change the value of the amounts which you fixed, but also the exchange rates will lead to the effect that if you say 10,000 euro for taxpayers here, and on the other hand 5,000 far away stand dollars on the other hand, which is then economically the same, the exchange rate would deviate so that after 10, 20 or 30 years these 2 amounts have a completely different significance. So that is what you can't do. So the best solution is probably to define small and low importance of a cross-border case, but by referring to the time during which you work in the other state. However, cases where a taxpayer takes up a job in the other state should not be simplified. There it is the most simple and adequate solution that if you take up a job, let's say in the Netherlands, the Dutch should get the right to tax your job income from that job from the beginning, irrespective how long you work there. If you get fired after 2 days or if you stay there for 30 years, should make no difference, because it would not be a simplification but a complication if you tell an employer, let's say during the first 1, 2, 3 or 4 months of somebody's work in your country, you will not know where to pay the taxes for this guy too. So a job in the other country, that will be possible in two cases. First, you apply to a Dutch firm for a position, then you have a Dutch employer, so a job in the Netherlands. It may also be possible that you don't apply to a Dutch firm, but to the um, local bank office of Deutsche Bank in Amsterdam. If you apply for a position in the local office of Deutsche Bank at Amsterdam, then it's clear that you have a job in the Netherlands, although your employer is formally not a Dutch firm, but a German firm. However, that should also be regarded as a position in the Netherlands. So in two cases, a simplification rule should not be applied. First, when you have a Dutch employer, so an employer in your working country, or when you have a position in a permanent establishment of your employer in that other country. Okay. So for this reason, we can understand how Article 15.2, the modification for cases of small importance, works. First, the remuneration for short time stays outside your country of residence may not be taxed in the country where you work, but only in the country of residence. So they say, if you for a short time just have to work in another country, for example, you sit in an aircraft during a business travel, it crosses French territory, then France can forget the case. This is regulated in the treaty. Only your home country can tax you. However, if you have a job in the other country, then that simplification rule will not apply. Now, what can be seen or defined as a short time stay in the other country, which you can ignore to simplify things? The first principle will be it's an all or nothing case. The idea of the simplification rule is that you don't need to care to hand in a tax declaration for amounts like 20, 30, 40 euro to a foreign state in a foreign language. Now, if you have very frequent short time stays, for example, when every second or even when 4 days out of 5 you always stay for a short time in the other country or travel to the other country, then you work more in the other country than at home. This is no longer an unimportant case. We can't ignore that. So Article 15.2 says we only ignore short-time stays if they do not add up to more than 183 days during 12 months. Now, if you surpass the 183 days, then it's justified to hand in a tax declaration, and then you should do it for everything, because the idea to apply that clause is to save you the formalities. Once you are forced to do the formalities in the other state, then they should be completely fulfilled. So then you would have to declare all the 184 days completely. So it's all or nothing. You either are freed of the foreign tax declaration or you have to hand it in completely. The second important aspect of that simplification rule is one counts the days in the other state during a fixed period. Formally, in the beginning, in the 1960s or 70s, so that was during the calendar year. Now some clever employers had the idea to send their employees to the other country from, let's say, the 3rd of July to the end of the year, and that was less than 183 days, so they didn't have to pay taxes in the other country. And then they let them stay in the new year from the 1st of January till, let's say, the 28th of June. That was again less than 183 days in year 02. However, in total, a person was without any interruption 360 days or so working in the other country. That was evidently not what the rule was meant for, and to avoid this very easy trick, later the rule was changed. The 183 days rule only applies in cases where there is no imaginable period of 12 months however you define it, during which that worker has more than 183 days of stay in the other country. That is sufficient to get rid of unimportant cases, but it makes it absolutely impossible to do tricks like this, so to stay, let's say, a complete year in the other country. And the third important aspect is, when you count the days for that simplification rule, you must read the text properly. The text speaks of days of stay, where you stay in the other country, not of working days. The idea is, if you are in the other country more than you are at home, more than 183 days, then the right to tax you with your work income for these days should go to the source country. Now it's relatively clear that with all these free weekends and all these holidays which exist, with merely the working days, you would probably never surpass that 183 days limit. So it is clear that the literal understanding of the text is really the right one. Days where you stay in the other country are counted. So also free days, holidays, weekends, if you stay in the other country. That means if you are a German employer, or if you are an employer somewhere else in a country in the world, and send an employee to another country to work there, and that employee stays over the weekend there, the 2 days of the weekend, although they are free of work, will be counted as days of stay and count for the 183 days limit. It might even be that if you send your employee for 180 days to another country and then stop the work there, then the employee still might surpass the limit, because it might be that the employee later goes there and has a holiday of 7 days in that country, and then he or she would have stayed there for 187 days within the limit. And so taxes in the other country would be triggered. So the recommendation to any employer would be, take great care that you can also follow up where your employees stay during the leisure time. Now, that's probably not possible due to data protection rules, and your employees will be a bit confused or irritated. So the best way is probably to stop the working days in the other country when you come near 150 days or so, that you can absolutely be sure that your employee cannot, even with a complete holiday in that country afterwards, not surpass the 183 days limit. Good. Surprisingly, when you apply the rule, there might be interesting outcomes. For example, what happens if an employee is sent 90 days to the Netherlands and 120 days to Belgium, and the rest is, let's say, 3 days where he stays at home? In that case, you must know that the time limit is tested for each source country individually, because the sense behind the rule is just, is it tolerable to ask for a tax declaration of somebody for just 1, 2, 3 days or so? And in the example here on the screen, A lives in Aachen and goes 90 days to the Netherlands and 120 to Belgium. The test for the Netherlands just says he just works in the Netherlands for 90 days. That's not much enough. So the days in the Netherlands will be ignored under the simplification rule, the 183 days rule. Only Germany can tax that income. And the Belgium days will also be ignored. They are less than 183 days in Belgium, so the right to tax goes to Germany for these days and not to Belgium. So it might be that even if you work most of the time outside your country of residence, only the country of residence taxes you. That makes sense under the simplification aspect. No problem. Yeah, it might also be that you have constellations like these. B is in Aachen, lives in Aachen, has a job in Aachen, but the firm also has a second shop in Amsterdam somewhere. And now B's boss says, hey, in Amsterdam, they are all sick and are in hospital. There is a dangerous shortage of workers there. You need to help out there. Take a suitcase, pack it with the most necessary things, travel to Amsterdam and work there for 3 months because otherwise Amsterdam shop breaks down. The tax treatment here is, basically he is still resident in Germany, so all his job income would go to Germany. However, the Dutch can claim taxes for the working time spent in the Netherlands. Now he spent 3 months in the Netherlands. That's less than 183 days, but however, let's look exactly to what he did. For 3 months, he had a position in a shop in the Netherlands because he no longer worked for the headquarters in Germany. He had been transferred to the permanent establishment of his employer in the Netherlands. So although his original contract was for Germany, his effective working place was for 3 months in a permanent establishment and for a permanent establishment of his employer in the Netherlands. So no simplification rule, directly and only taxation in the Netherlands. What also might be surprising and what you should note and memorize is that the 183 days clause only applies to short-time stays outside your own country of residence, so only to a foreign country. That means if A from Aachen takes up a job in the Netherlands and works there nearly the whole year, then the Dutch can tax his job income because he works there. However, one day his boss orders him to go to a customer in Germany. So from the Dutch firm, he takes a car and travels to Germany to repair a washing machine for a German customer. He crosses the German border at 9:30, arrives at the customer's house at 9:50, finishes his work at 10:30 and crosses back to the Netherlands at 11. So he worked for 1.5 hours in German territory. And now what does Article 15.1 say? Only Germany gets the money, apart from the time where he worked in the Netherlands. Now, during these 1.5 hours, he didn't work in the Netherlands. Dutch have no right under the basic rule to touch his salary for this time. Article 15.2 only applied to short time stays outside Germany, so doesn't apply in this case. Final result, Germany is the only country which has the right to tax these 1.5 hours wages. So he will have to hand in a German tax declaration in Germany. This is surprisingly not regarded as intolerable by the writers of the DTT model. Evidently, they have the conviction that handing in a tax declaration in your own state is not intolerable because it's not a foreign language, not foreign rules, but your rules, and so on. So that is why they did never change the rules for this surprising situation. Further, you should note that sometimes there are special rules for certain groups of people in addition. For example, personnel on board of a ship or aircraft in international traffic crosses borders several times a day, probably. So there is a simplification rule, especially for this group of people, which deviates from the basic rule because otherwise it might be too complicated. Several DTTs also have, especially if they are older ones, particular rules for commuters who travel daily between their home state and their job. However, there is no standard text for this in the OECD model because the OECD model is a model for the relation between all states of the world, and it makes no sense to propose a commuter rule for a DTT between Germany and Tunisia or Germany and Australia. So usually this is added individually into the text of neighboring countries. However, if the idea is we make a special rule for people who travel daily between home and workplace, then you will find out that then if you formulate it this way, there will be no application at all because nobody commutes daily. When the people have holiday, weekend, or when they are sick, they stay at home. So very often the basic idea, commuters who travel daily, will be refined and defined more particularly, more especially in the DTTs. So that is that you find there an exclusive, no, um, a clear definition, sorry, of what is meant by commuter in the context of that DTT. Let's say somebody who travels to work daily each working day and does not stay at home for more than 20 days or 60 days during a year. Now, if you have such a definition and somebody stays at home for 61 days, you have a problem. Because then the basic rule comes into application again. When you have to deal with managers or directors of a supervisory board and things like that, you have a special problem. If you apply the basic rules to them, imagine the following situation. A is a manager and works for a Dutch firm. He gets a salary of 100,000 a year, and he says he works 5 days a week in the firm, but also at least 1 day still at home additionally in his private rooms. So we would have to deal with working time 6 days a week, and only 5 days out of 6 would be spent in the Netherlands. So 1 out of 6, so approximately 16% of his total salary, could only be taxed in Germany, his home state. Or he says that he works for 8 hours a day in the firm, then travels home and usually spends another 1 or 2 hours at home, working additionally at home. That is not unusual for a manager. If that's true, let's say if 8 hours a day are worked in the firm and 2 hours at home in the average, then 20% of his salary are not earned in the Netherlands, but the working time would be in his country of residence. So 20% of his salary would not be taxable by the Dutch, but only by the Germans. The problem which everybody then has is, how can we follow that up and prove this? Let's say with somebody lower in the rank of, or lower in the hierarchy, you can always ask a boss for a certificate, for an attestation. Yes, I certify that there is working time at home, that we check it, that our reasonable estimate and genuine belief is there are 2 hours of working time at home. But with a superior, who can certify that? Who is going to control that guy? So you would have to believe him. And people might be telling different things than the truth, so commit tax fraud. Or it might be that one of the two fiscal administrations doesn't believe, the other one believes. You also would have a problem if these people say, because of these difficulties, we don't talk about the working time at home. Now, in that case, when manager A says, mentioning my working time at home is too difficult, so I forget it, and I don't tell the fiscal officers that I also work at home after returning to my home, then that would be tax fraud, because his home state would have a right to a part of the salary under the treaty rules. However, he hides the information, so the tax is there not paid, so it's tax fraud. So whatever you do, difficulties, problems, quarrels, disputes, catastrophe. The solution is that a special article has been proposed by the OECD for managers, directors, and members of the supervisory board, which says if you have such a position, the right to tax your salary completely goes to the state of residence of your company for which you work, irrespective of where you spend your working time. So that is a concession to real life, and that makes it easy and possible to assess and tax these people. The next problem for a special group of people is when retired persons get a pension from the former firm. Imagine which drama might happen there. Imagine R is a retired employee and has worked for a long time for the X company. And for this reason, he gets now a lifelong pension from his former employer, the X company. However, the X company was so convinced of R's ability that they furthered his career by sending him all around the world. So, as a beginner, starting his job, lowest part in the hierarchy, R worked 3 years in Germany. Then they said, you are really capable, able, or convincing, so we send you 5 years to our office in Japan. Then later he got a position as a deputy manager in South Africa for 3 years. Then 8 years he was sent in the US. Then 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, or whatever was left over, he had a top job in Germany again. Now, for all that together, he gets pension from the ex-company. And now imagine the genuine rules of, or the usual rules of Article 15 would apply. Then you would have to determine which part of that pension, let's say 5,000 euro a month, is paid for the years in Germany, for the years in Japan, for the years in South Africa. That's absolutely impossible. So the only solution, or the solution to which the OECD then took refuge, is just to say, okay, we make a special article that income which people get for former employment during their retirement is only taxable in their current state of residence. That solves the problem. Yeah, and this gave you, I hope at least now, a small overview about how income from employment is taxed and some related articles. And I thank you for watching the video and hope we see each other again soon. Recover well since then and come back to the channel. Thanks and goodbye.